It's living hell 24 hours, 7 days a week.
In prison for something they didn't do.
There was a robbery going bad.
Once they're free,
When I got out, I came home with nothing. I didn't even have a dime in my pocket.
the Commonwealth doesn't have to pay them for all those years wrongfully behind bars.
Pennsylvania's a bit behind the rest of the country.
2019 was a record year for Pennsylvania. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, 14 people were released from prison after serving time for crimes they did not commit.
And the NBC 10 investigators found once cleared inmates are out. The state has no responsibility to pay them or help them rebuild their lives. NBC 10's Rosemary Connors explains.
Dirty job.
Shovel in hand, Johnny Berry is cleaning up other people's messes.
Make sure it doesn't kind of rip.
It's not his dream job.
I would prefer to do something else, but this is what I'm doing at the time, and I have to do it. I have a newborn son. He's almost 3 months old, and he costs, man.
According to the National Registry of Exonerations, Berry is one of the more than 80 people who have been exonerated in Pennsylvania since 1989.
I was actually just running the streets, which led to me being falsely accused and then ultimately convicted for a horrible crime I had nothing to do with.
The crime was murder. He was convicted in 1995 and sentenced to life without parole. Last year, Berry was exonerated. He had been falsely accused.
I was 16. I'm 42 now.
He didn't have job training in prison. He was a lifer, never getting out. But now that Berry is out, after 23 years in prison, he needs to adjust to freedom.
I'm working as an underdog, a victim, if you will. And I need help, you know? And I'm sitting here, I'm free, thankfully, but I have to be able to survive out here.
And he says the state is no help.
The state offers none to exonerees here in Pennsylvania. We don't have any resources readily available to us.
The Commonwealth is one of 15 states that does not have a law that compensates wrongfully convicted people.
People are being exonerated, walking out of prison with nothing.
Michelle Feldman is with the Innocence Project. She advocates for compensation laws.
The Commonwealth not having a law, it's really neglecting people that they harmed in the first place by, putting them in prison for a crime they didn't commit. And then when they get out and they don't provide them with any resources, it just is continued injustice.
The idea is the state would set an amount to pay the exoneree for each year he or she is incarcerated. For example, in New Jersey, it's up to $50,000 per year of wrongful incarceration. In Texas, it's $80,000. In New York, there is no dollar limit. But Feldman says any law has to be about more than money. The wrongfully convicted also need services.
That includes in a lot of states job training, tuition assistance, counseling, help with transportation and housing and health insurance. And all of these things that, really we take for granted that help us survive.
Johnny Berry could use the money and the services.
People like me, right?
He has a family to support. So he'll keep cleaning, working to regain what was lost to a wrongful conviction.
I like to call it sort of a compassionate compensation, if you will. Just showing that, hey, the state recognizes that a mistake was made, we've been victimized, and just to give us an opportunity to be able to get on our feet.
For the investigators, I'm Rosemary Connors, NBC 10 News.
And Johnny Berry has filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of Philadelphia. His case is pending. It's the only way a wrongfully convicted person can get compensation in Pennsylvania, but doesn't always work.
Yeah, coming up on NBC 10 News at 5, the NBC 10 investigators will show you why some exonerees are left out and what one lawmaker says he is going to do about it.
What happens when the wrong person gets convicted?
You destroyed my life now.
How does that person adjust once they're released from prison?
I came home with nothing. I didn't even have a dime in my pocket.
Who should help?
How can we justify taking away 10, 20, 30 years of someone's life and not compensating them for something that the government did to them?
Pennsylvania is one of 15 states with no law to compensate the wrongly convicted.
The NBC 10 investigators found the only option exonerees have is to sue the federal court. But as NBC 10's Rosemary Connors shows us, not everyone can go down that route.
Vincent Moto started playing drums when he was in grade school.
I love drums. I played drums all my life.
But a 1987 wrongful conviction derailed Moto's dreams of a music career.
I'm standing here the whole time. I'm innocent. I'm innocent. I'm innocent.
He served 10.5 years for sexual assault until a DNA test led to his exoneration.
I was expecting them at least to compensate me for some of the time, you know, for the time that I was wrongfully incarcerated. You destroyed my life.
But he received nothing. The state of Pennsylvania doesn't have a law mandating some type of payment and social services for time spent wrongfully behind bars. 35 other states, the District of Columbia, and the federal government do. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, since 1989, 81 people have been exonerated in Pennsylvania. 14 of those happened just last year.
In Pennsylvania, the only option that an exoneree has is to file a civil rights case.
Jeffrey Gutman is a professor at George Washington University. He says federal civil rights lawsuits are hard to prove, and not every wrongful conviction case qualifies.
They have to plead and ultimately prove that a state agent, a state officer, or a state municipality engaged in unconstitutional misconduct that deprived them of the right to fair trial.
So a case of mistaken identity or new DNA testing might not mean a civil rights violation. Gutman's analysis of the civil rights lawsuits in the Commonwealth shows about half of Pennsylvania's exonerees have filed.
They're difficult, and only about a quarter have been successful, either by settlement or verdict, in getting compensation in Pennsylvania.
That's why advocates push for state compensation laws.
It's just the right thing to do.
Legislation.
And it's what State Representative Christopher Rabb wants to do.
How can we justify taking away 10, 20, 30 years of someone's life and not compensating them for something that the government did to them?
Rabb says he's going to introduce a bill. He sent out this co-sponsorship memoranda. In it, he says the awards from civil lawsuits have cost Pennsylvania taxpayers more than $29 million. He's proposing offering $65,000 per year spent incarcerated, plus social services.
It's not just the money. It's access to services, because you've been denied so many services being incarcerated.
Rabb believes his effort will gain bipartisan support.
There's no one who can fight me on this, right? This is something that transcends party affiliation, generation, political ideology.
Rabb says if passed, the benefits will be retroactive, helping people like Moto.
I'm always struggling. Electric bill come, a gas bill come, a water bill come. I'm sitting down every penny. I'm pinching pennies to rob Peter to pay Paul.
Vincent Moto says he's still feeling the effects of being wrongfully convicted 24 years after his release.
These plugs right here, they're there for my label.
He wants to make a living building and selling his drum kits. But he hasn't been able to make up financially or emotionally for the lost time.
The state or somebody has to be held responsible for what they did to us. We're innocent people.
For the investigators, I'm Rosemary Connors, NBC 10 News.
Now to an exclusive group of men who share a bond few can claim. They served time in prison, even though they shouldn't have been behind bars in the first place.
Tonight, NBC 10's Rosemary Connors shares their stories of exoneration and why freedom has a cost.
We support each other.
Bro, this is the closest thing to a program that we have. Us coming together in a meeting of brotherhood with the same interests.
Those same interests? Time spent locked up for crimes they did not commit.
27 years and 4 months. 24 years.
Almost 13 years.
23 years.
What does that number mean to you?
The number 23 to me means loss upon loss upon loss, and then a win. And a win in terms of an exoneration. But we gotta pay the bills.
For Johnny Berry, his freedom means manual labor, cleaning up garbage for a living. Sentenced to life in prison for a deadly robbery in which he was falsely accused, Berry explains he never received advanced education or job training for life beyond bars. The Innocence Project in Philadelphia brought this small club of convicts turned exonerated men together. They meet to share their experiences on the inside and outside.
How do you all feel about coming home and there isn't a compassionate compensation bill in place?
And to come home and get nothing, that was like a slap in the face. That was a slap in the face, man. Because if we was on parole, we get housing, They help us find jobs. They help us with everything.
Sean Thomas was released from prison in 2017, his murder conviction overturned. The prosecution agreed he had a solid alibi that Philadelphia detectives were aware of, but never investigated.
24 years is gone. I'm not gonna never get it back. Grandmom ain't coming back. Grandfather ain't coming back.
He filed a lawsuit against the city of Philadelphia for the wrongful conviction. Just last year, the city settled with Sean Thomas for over $4 million. His settlement is unusual. These kinds of civil rights violations are difficult to prove in court, and not every case qualifies. When the innocent can't bring a lawsuit, there's nowhere to turn. Pennsylvania is one of 15 states that does not have a law in the books to compensate the wrongfully convicted.
Had we come home and been on parole or probation, there are so many different resources readily available to those type of individuals or that class of people, but not to exonerees.
In addition to discussing their newfound finances with no help from the Commonwealth to get back on their feet, these men spend their group sessions reflecting on the place that almost stole their sanity.
I had to physically fight people as well as outmaneuver people mentally because it's carnivores in there.
You in there with rapists. You in there with psychopaths.
But even in the darkness, they could hope.
What kept you grounded?
My family.
Willie Veazey is a newly free man. Philadelphia prosecutors dropped the murder charges against him last October.
Family, man. That's what kept me grounded, man. You know what I mean? Listen, there was a whole lot of times, man, I had a whole lot of negative thoughts in my head, man. Seriously, because I didn't see no light at the end of that tunnel.
For these former lifers, it's the simple things these days that separate their past from their future. For the investigators, I'm Rosemary Connors, NBC 10 News.
Rare insights there from those men. Meantime, Pennsylvania lawmaker Christopher Rabb, who represents parts of Philadelphia, tells NBC 10 he is introducing a compensation bill in Harrisburg. It would include $65,000 for each year an innocent person spends in prison.
And it will also offer social services to help the wrongfully convicted get back on their feet.